Welcome back to Sun, Sand, and Sold here with David Haber. I'm Josh Tomey, visiting with Mayor Howard Weinberg of the city of Aventura. And Mayor, we've been talking about the Hero Housing Program, and you touched earlier on some of the transportation initiatives that you've worked on, including the freebie program. Would love to hear more about how that came to be. It's an incredible program, and obviously for a city like Aventura, where it's 3.5 square miles, it has to be really impactful.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd love to
One good question for him. Okay.
I love to talk about this because Freebie existed prior to Aventura, our involvement with it. They were a private company, a startup. They have an app and very user-friendly. And you would see them like on South Beach, like on the campus at FIU. They looked like golf carts on steroids.
My wife calls me that, by the way, golf cart on steroids.
I thought that our as you
I have
say,
so many
3.5.
retorts to that I'm not going to make. I deserve 1 point just for not making a joke.
In our 3.5 square miles, it would be so perfect where people don't have to take their cars out of the condominium parking garage because, like, that's a whole thing in of itself, right?
It's 20 minutes.
I was going to say a 20-minute commute out of the garage.
And then to go 6 minutes and then park somewhere.
Right.
So, and obviously we don't want the golf carts because you end up on Biscayne Boulevard and you're going to, if people are going to their doctor's appointments in the hospital district, you need a real vehicle. So we ended up with these beautiful Tesla X's and a couple of big vans, also electric, for people who with mobility challenge who are in wheelchairs.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
they're wheelchair accessible. Now the Tesla X's you can put a wheelchair in the back if the person can get out of it and get in the seat. But someone who can't get out of their wheelchair, we have these vans. And they know who those people are, so they automatically send those. Anyway.
Small town.
It was something I was interested in when I was a commissioner. And we had circulator buses, okay? And they were free, and they were also paid for by the county transportation tax. As you probably know, the half-penny sales tax, then they divvy up those funds based on population to all 34 municipalities.
Your half cent at work, as they say on the side of the bus.
Right, and it has to be used for transportation matters. So you can fix potholes with it, whatever you want, curb the streets. We use some of that money for circulator buses, and maybe they're like 20 passenger buses.
Little shuttle buses.
Shuttle buses. So we had 6 colors, yellow, red, whatever, and there was a route system. And as a commissioner, I had looked at it and I said, okay, again, kind of like Hero Housing. I'm like, what am I missing here? This seems really dumb to me. And then I found out that we actually had a consultant come up with it, and they used some transportation majors, some kind of a program at University of South Florida to give us this big, thick report that we paid for. And I'm like, okay, somebody tell me what's wrong here.
Number one, give me my money back.
So here's the deal. You tell me, okay. So what I did was I decided to do undercover boss, and I rode the buses, okay, for 2 or 3 months, each line, at least twice on each line, with sunglasses on and a baseball cap, and I counted ridership, okay. Number one, I found that this is the transportation option of last resort. Okay?
The citizen's insurance of public transportation.
You do not get on this bus if you do not absolutely have to. And at no time ever in all of my rides over 3 months did I reach double digits. So in other words, there were never more than 9 people max, many times 1 or 2. Many times someone who was homeless that was in the air conditioning for many hours, right? And these are 20 passenger buses, and they are burning fuel around the city. These are not
combustion engines,
okay.
Right?
Now, here's the part that gets to me, okay? You don't necessarily know Aventura, or the listeners don't, but I'll explain in a minute. If you live at Aventura Lakes and you are going to get your groceries at Sarah's Tent, the distance is 0.4 miles, okay? Less than half a mile. When you take the bus from where you live, for whatever reason, all of the buses go in one-way circles, okay? One way.
So like counterclockwise, like all the way down.
No matter
to the
which
south,
route you take, you go in a one-way circle. So if you are going to And again, it still makes me laugh. You're going 0.4 miles, remember.
How much did you pay this consultant?
Now, my work was free. So you ride the bus. This is a true story. You ride the bus, and I did my own report and gave it to the commission. You ride the bus for 55 minutes. These are all 1 hour loops. You ride the bus for 55 minutes. You get to the store, you buy your groceries. You ride the bus home for 5 minutes.
You could have walked.
No, well, think about people mobility challenged, okay? Or they can't carry their groceries. Now, same thing. You want to get your groceries at Sarah's tent. You live at One Island Place, a condominium on the other side of the route. You get there in 5 minutes.
It takes an hour to get home.
For 55 minutes, your ice cream is melting.
Right.
Okay.
Your chicken thighs aren't so tasty
Now,
anymore.
even if you just doubled back and had a route that goes both ways, so you've already cut it to 30 minutes, right? But these are 60-minute routes. Okay. But here's the kicker.
It gets better from here.
It gets better. I'm telling you. I was in disbelief. It shouldn't take 60 minutes for the loop. Remember, we're 3.5 square miles. No matter where you go in Aventura in a circle, it's so what?
The only place it takes 60 minutes is to get from I-95 to Biscayne Boulevard,
right,
on 199th Street,
which is not Aventura. Thank you very much.
Well,
as I always tell
for people to know.
Yes, it is not Aventura. When you're on Ivesbury Road and it's a nightmare, don't blame us. Okay, so I found out by riding the bus, and the people who ride the bus are not the people who are going to come to City Hall and complain, right? They are the maid. They may not have English as a
first
skill,
language.
Right, or even they may not speak English.
Right.
And they're not going to tell us what's going on. And we clearly failed at supervising this vendor relationship. So I ride the bus, and the driver goes to the Citibank parking lot near the mall, and he parks.
And he sits there.
But I'm on the bus. There's no one else on the bus. If that's not where they go to the loading dock of JCPenney, and they sit. And I'm sitting out.
So again, I used to buy fireworks.
By the way, the motor's running, so at least there's air conditioning, but they're burning fuel. So I'm sitting in Citibank, incredulous, like, what's up? And all the drivers come, and there's 3 or 4 buses. So, of course, I'm taking pictures. And eventually they catch on that I'm like undercover
You're
boss.
undercover
like,
cop.
I am looking at 3 of the 6 buses rendezvousing, sometimes 4 of them. 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the 60-minute loop is just sitting there. They get off the bus and they talk to each other, and then they get back on so that they're on schedule for a 60-minute loop. And they just hang out at the Citibank while the bus is up. I'm like, this is the most inefficient, crazy thing. If anyone's on the bus, this is what they have to do.
That's amazing.
So I basically uncovered this, what I call a complete scam, right? We're paying for this.
How'd the commission respond? I mean,
So I'm going to tell you now.
He's going to unpack this for you.
Yes,
this is being unpacked.
So it gets worse as they discover who I am. At one point, a bus pulls up. A supervisor, I didn't know at the time, jumps off and runs over to me and starts literally screaming in my face, "What politician told you to do this? What politician told you to do this?" You know, screaming, like knowing that they're doing something very, very wrong, which, if you know my history in Surfside, I cannot stand political corruption, okay? Cannot stand it. Work very hard to stamp it out. So.
Oh, this should have been on video.
I said
it's too good.
To my commission, "You're not going to believe this." By the way, I want to make something clear. So at the time when I was doing this, I had been termed out of the commission. So there's no sunshine issues. In 2020, I had to leave the commission because of term limits. And I had already given them the freebie thing, but it hadn't been implemented yet. So then I leave the commission, and this is when I'm doing this with the buses. So I'm not on the commission, but they respect my vision. And so I said, no one's going to believe me. No one is going to believe me that I am sitting for 20 minutes in a bank parking lot while bus drivers have a conversation and I'm stuck on the bus.
This is also pandemic time, right?
Yeah, actually, yes. There were masks, yes. I said to the mayor.
That's how he was undercover boss.
I said that helped.
He had a mask on.
I said to Mayor Weissman,
for sure.
I said, you have to come for a bus ride. The commission is not going to believe me because everybody knows that I'm an advocate for freebie. and that I think we should be reallocating our money from these ridiculous buses to freebies and not make these people suffer on this bus when they can have an app and we can show them. And by the way, you can also just call a number if you don't have an app, and let the maids and the building maintenance people, let them have a nice, comfortable ride back to the bus station instead of this. This is not
Addressing
fair.
your question of how do you solve it.
Right.
Solve,
So I said, please, but everyone knows my feeling already. Ride the bus with me, okay? I swear to God this happened. The mayor gets on with me. She has a hat on, sunglasses. She has a mask on. The bus loops end up where the bus depot is at the mall. I don't know if you've ever been in there.
Yeah.
But there's tons of diesel fuel from Dade and Broward buses. There's a roof on it capturing it all, but it's at least 110 degrees on there. This was in the summer, okay? It is the most uncomfortable, unhealthy environment in the world. And that's where people wait. The bus driver pulls in. I'm with the mayor. He has no idea who she is. He actually says, I could not have asked for her to ride the bus at a better time. He says, you're going to need to get off the bus now. I'm going to take a break. I'll be back in 20 minutes. I said, where are we to go? He said, you can sit right there. And he points to a bench. Literally, it's over 100 degrees and it's all diesel fumes.
Right.
And I said, you want this woman, and I might have said elderly, but I'm not sure. But I said, Enid, don't tell him who you are. Don't blow your cover. She was so upset. I said, you want this woman to sit on this bench for 20 minutes and breathe that air while you take a break? And Enid said, I will get off the bus when you get me to my stop. And it was perfect. So he gets on the phone, blah, 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 blah. And then he takes us, true story, to the Citibank parking lot.
To wait with the other buses.
And we sit there and I time it and it's only me and the mayor on the bus. And I'm like, now do you believe what I'm telling? She goes, I never doubted you. I'm like, but the commission would not believe, they'll believe you and me together. And we sit there and they knew something was up. And I took pictures of the mayor sitting by herself on the bus, and the bus driver gets off the bus and he is out there taking pictures of me while I have a picture of him.
This is a comedy of errors.
Is this unbelievable? I have a picture of him taking a picture of me. Needless to say, when I did my report.
This is a great origin story, by the way, for Freebie. But Freebie's going to be downloading our video, by the way, and saying this is why Freebie exists.
This is what I did in order to prove that our people, and especially our working class people that come every day, were being taken advantage of.
Yeah,
right.
Because I'm not going to let that happen to them. So we cut from 6 to 3 the route and took that money and allocated it toward freebies, started educating that, hey, here's an app. Use this when you finish work. They'll take you right to the bus station.
What's the use like? I mean, are you measuring use and you have decent data at this point?
The beautiful part about it is it's all the numbers are available at the touch of a button because it's app-based.
It's app-based, right.
So I haven't looked in a long time, but it was, 10,000 per month, 15,000, whatever the numbers. And I don't want to misstate it, but we know exactly the peak times. We know exactly who's using it. There are people, unfortunately, a few people that have been banned because they're not good. Oh, and one of the negatives was we had to raise it to 18-year-old minimum because the kids were pranking them. They were calling them and not being there. And also, one thing we didn't want was for moms to use it for school pickup and drop off. That's just not the purpose of it.
Right.
Anyway, that was the genesis of it.
That's an amazing.
Let me ask you a question about flooding. I want to ask you about flooding in South Florida, and I want to ask you about areas around Aventura that do flood in either the king tides or the heavy rains, separate and apart from hurricanes, obviously. What is the city doing? How is it working with the county, the state legislature, in order to deal with roads and sewer systems that just cannot handle all the water?
So just as a baseline, I want to remind everyone that we choose to live at sea level, okay?
Actually, Aventura was a swamp when Don bought most of it.
Well, we don't like to say that he sold swampland because that's not accurate, but he did an amazing job.
He drained it first.
I saw him the other day, and God bless him. He's an amazing person. So we have a problem because when there's a certain amount of rain within a certain time period, there's nothing we can do.
Right.
What we're proud about in Aventura is we get better at it every year with more pumps. and more drainage and better everything. And with the latest one, I think it was June, where it was really, really bad storm, we had an entire summer's worth of rain in 48 hours.
I remember. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And we lost a lot of cars that tried to drive through it. But within 45 minutes of the stoppage of the rain,
You drained it.
we were 80% passable streets.
That's great.
Within 24 hours, we were 100% passable. So we keep working at it. Every year I go to Tallahassee, usually we bring home money for those purposes. This year, we're fully funded in our budget. We're going to actually raise 191 Street, one of our two worst areas. We're going to actually raise the street, which is the street that Hero Housing is going to be on. So we do work on it. Right in the center of the storm, right when it's happening, and Channel 10 was out there at one of our places, there's not much we can do right then. The bottom line is the ocean is right there.
Right.
We're getting better at it.
So let me jump in here, because that sounds like, again, this is all progress, and clearly Aventura, under your leadership and as a community is ahead of the curve in so many ways. Are these kind of efforts, whether it's flooding, transportation, housing, do you think these are scalable, Mayor? Do you think this is something that can be applied to larger municipalities? I mean, putting the sort of the small town orientation aside, I mean, it seems like these models have an inherent capability of being scaled. I mean, if you look at sort of, or is this really, do you need that kind of density in population that Aventura has, which is somewhat unique, given the population?
I think it's definitely scalable because our county is very dense, right? So maybe if you go municipality by municipality, it's more difficult. But on a county-wide effort, there's no reason why it can't be. And again, you have more and more needs and more priorities and more distractions, right? It makes it more difficult. For us, thank God, we don't have a lot of problems, right? And we have a commission that doesn't fight each other. We're all rowing in the same direction.
Which is equally unique, of course.
Yeah. I mean, listen, let me tell you, because it should be said, right? I don't work alone. And in November, what was it, November 5th, the election? Half of my commission changed.
But the vision did not.
6 commissioners, 3 new ones. It will make zero difference in terms of the way we move forward and get things done. You can't say that in a lot of other cities.
No, you can't. No.
It's usually a war. There's the good guys and the bad guys, and the bad guys and the good guys. Nobody knows.
Right.
Or the bad guys and the bad guys.
Pick a side.
Or the bad guys and the bad guys.
So we're very, very lucky. This 2025 will be celebrating our 30th anniversary, and we're just moving in one direction, which is forward, and it's great. So we're very fortunate. So that's part of it, right? We're also not saddled with tremendous pensions from all these years.
Right.
We didn't make bad business decisions for all these years. Our business model basically is we contract things out.
Right.
How's your bond rating?
I think it's excellent, and I think it's outstanding. I think it's as good as it can be.
And one other question that I have is, do you see hotels coming to Aventura?
Well, I saw one.
I know there's Turnberry Resort, but
I saw several in the last few years. I think right now in general.
Or do you see more hotel condo?
I see hotels right now. They're having a hard time with new construction with their business model.
Yes.
But we had in Aventura in the last several years, Aloft and AC, and the Aventura Hilton is doing very well. And the Serena Hilton opened in the hospital district, which we're now calling Uptown Aventura, by the way. In Uptown Aventura, there's the Serena Hilton. We have the Aventura Hilton. We have the AC. We have the Aloft. Obviously, we have Turnberry Resort, one of the finest in the country. And don't forget about Courtyard Inn and Renaissance Inn. So,
right, the legacy hotels next to the mall. Yeah, sure.
We're good, but that's at least 4 new ones in the last several years.
Right.
But I think right now, if you're talking currently, I think it's a tough time for the hotel industry to be building new products.
But the fact is you did have new hotels move into the area.
And the Aventura Hilton, we have our Aventura Marketing Council Chamber of Commerce breakfast there every month. And they're fully booked.
Right. So
Haber Law has one of its representatives attend all of those meetings.
hashtag Haber Law. So using that as a pivot over to condos, I mean, obviously condos are such a substantial portion of the real estate economy in Aventura. We've all been frontline in watching what's happening in the condo space following the tragedy in Surfside, new legislation. what kind of impacts are you seeing on a local basis in Aventura in terms of planning around some of the new requirements, structural integrity reserve studies, some of the maintenance fee issues that we know everybody struggle with, insurance, all of that? I mean, what are you seeing at the Aventura level?
So we're the flagship all condominium municipality in Florida. And so I think it's always important for us to take a leadership role. And listen, it's been difficult for our residents. I personally live in a building that was only 21 years old when we special assessed. It cost me $30,000 for concrete restoration. You know, we want to get ahead of it, but it's all a result of Champlain Towers. Concrete restoration, waterproofing, and painting. $30,000 for me. So the bottom line is we've promoted, the county did a great job of coming up with a zero interest loan program up to $50,000 based on need for your special assessments if they're infrastructure.
It's a great program.
Okay?
Yeah, that was a great one.
So it was rolled out in Aventura with the county mayor and our county commissioner in our commission chambers because, again, we're the flagship. So I'm hopeful the state will match something like that in this session. It's very important. The insurance thing is just a horrible situation, and obviously there's little to nothing we locally can do about it. Oftentimes it's frustrating because, you know, if you get outside of South Florida, there's not a lot of condominiums around, and in Tallahassee, they don't necessarily know what a condominium is. Senator Pizzo is the only senator that lives in a condominium, okay? Anyway, I will tell you this, though, and this, I think, is important. It may be something that people don't necessarily want to hear, but at some point, it doesn't make sense to throw good money after bad. And at some point, everything has a lifespan, right?
We talked about terminations yesterday.
Okay.
And we were talking about the new legislation that I can tell you the Brickell Homeowners Association president is very much in favor of lowering the percentage required to terminate a condominium. I agree with you 100%. You know, you can't have a 60, 70-year-old building that takes up that much space and has that much concrete. If you have to do $50 million of restoration, it just doesn't make sense to do it.
Right.
So,
but where do you put those people?
So, as I said, it may not be popular, right? People who've been living in the same place for a long time don't want change. I understand that. But you also have to think about, you have elderly people who thought that they would leave to their families a free and clear condominium, a nice asset. The reality of it is they're not going to be leaving them that if it's special assessed to the hilt, and what they thought was going to happen, unfortunately, through no fault of their own, isn't. Now, if there's
I disagree that it's no fault of their own.
Oh.
Because the reality is if they kicked the can down the road for 30 years because they didn't want to have reserves and they wanted to have someone pay for it later, but of course they've lived long enough, they're at the point where they're paying the later.
Okay.
Is sooner or later you got to pay the piper.
Yeah, I mean, if they're David's age, I mean, what do you expect?
Point well taken. And as Senator Pizzo often points out to people, yes, your maintenance went up 38% this year. How much did it go up for 10 years in a row? Nothing?
Right.
Now you're just paying the piper. So
that's right.
It's a point well taken. But if they have an opportunity to leave their family a bank account with the cash in it from a developer that pays over market value for it, and so for the last 2 or 3 years of their life, they rent. Maybe in some cases, that's a better decision.
I think in many cases, that's a better decision. And it's better for the tax base as well.
So I've been preparing our residents at many commission meetings where I say, if a developer is snooping around, it doesn't necessarily mean he's a predator. In some cases, it's a lifeline.
Right.
And you should listen to what they're saying.
Right. Not here to take your home. Right.
Again, you know, like in a P3.
Sometimes they're a savior.
Right.
Right. So in a P3, everyone wins, right? In a case like this, these people can get sometimes more than market value and not have to throw money into something that's not going to work. The developer gets what he's looking for, which is profit, which is okay. And the city is going to get an increase in their tax base and get new construction that's not going to be a danger. I mean, we had to red tag a condominium 2 months ago. They're over 50 years old and their 40-year certification hasn't been completed yet. And we had to red tag them and turn them over to the county. And
then everybody has to leave the building anyway.
And now they're working out with the county. But
I had walked that building some years ago, and it was already at
yes,
that time
and we
heading down.
can't look the other way, especially in wake of in wake of what happened in Surfside.
Nobody can look the other way.
Let me ask you a question in that regard. As the legislative session is about to start, and as committees are going to get together, are you going to be proposing to reduce the percentage required to terminate and or to increase the percentage required to block a termination?
And before you answer that, put an adjunct on that. What role do you think city government should be playing in this process? And then by extension, David's question.
So I think city government, the city government's input should be very important, especially, again, we're the flagship condominium community. They should want to know what we think. In terms of your question, we do everything on consensus, and we give our lobbyists a priority list to take to Tallahassee. Here's what we want. And so I'll see what the consensus is with my commissioners. Again, I personally am in favor of terminations for, like, I can name several places where I believe they'd be better off. But again, I'm not the one that's living there.
Well, but do you believe 5% should be able to block a termination?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
Absolutely
so you believe
not.
that
Absolutely
either
not.
that should be increased or the percentage to terminate should be lowered?
I think it's a distinction without a difference. You should be able to successfully terminate with it has to be a supermajority, but not 90, not 95.
Right.
But there's a number there that makes sense. What is it? Is it 75? Is it 80? I'm not sure what's exactly right, but the will of the people should be respected.
Right.
But I want to tell you,
That's the position I take. I take the position it should be 70 or 75%, and I believe to block it should be at least 15%. I don't think 5% should be able to block it. That's my position.
There have been condo terminations that have been wildly successful. Everybody was happy. Now, are people going to get 2.5 times market now? They might be too late. They probably could have. I don't know. But there are cases where it absolutely makes sense.
And it's a safety issue.
Exactly.
It's
We're not talking about an optics issue. We're talking about people's lives.
You're talking about people's lives and making sure that buildings are safe. And you're right that certain buildings or all buildings have a shelf life.
Right. And so do people, right? So do pets. At some point, you say,
well, I'm going to be cryogenically frozen. I tell my children, the reason I'm going to do one of those 360-year trusts is I'm going to be cryogenically frozen, and then I'm going to come back to spend my own money.
It's the very reason I'm not going to, just for total transparency.
I may spend your money by then.
You're welcome to.
I'll tell you what I've said to many developers. None of them have listened to me yet. I said, you know what the number one objection is, right? Where am I going to go, right? Especially someone who's older and someone who's been in the Aventura area for a long time. Where am I going to go?
Right.
I said, why don't you build an apartment building on the other side of Biscayne Boulevard, within 3 miles, 4 miles, where land costs are much lower? Just go west. And in addition to purchasing their unit at whatever agreed to price, give them a rental agreement at well below market for the remainder of their years. When they pass away, you'll go to full market on that.
Right.
There'll be less objection. They're still in the neighborhood. They're still close by. They can put that money in the bank account, earmark it for their children, which is what they had in mind anyway with their condo, and they can live something they can afford.
I don't know that they even need to do it below market, and or maybe just slightly below market, because if they stayed in the condo, right? Remember that when they moved into the condo, they looked at the economics of, let's say, paying $1,200 a month maintenance. Everybody was waiving reserves year after year after year, so they were looking at their fixed income and saying, well, I can afford this. Now that you have reserves which are required, and you also have special assessments to fix what wasn't done in preventative maintenance, to stay in that condo is more expensive than a rental in many cases.
So from a rational standpoint, I guess you're 100% correct. But if you want to incentivize them and get past that natural objection, let them know they're getting a bargain.
Right.
And Anyway, no one's done it yet.
I'm going to avoid the joke.
You can't pass up the sale. I was going to say, please don't go there.
We would get it cut anyway.
So no one's done it yet, but I'm saying that's always the objection. I've nowhere to go. Okay, well, I'm also building an apartment.
Where you can go.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be great. And then that'll be a successful apartment building at full market.
Right. And then 10 years later, they've got a cash cow in their hands. Right. So I want to bring this back full circle as we start to wrap the episode up, Mayor. You know, all of these things are the ways that Aventura is leading the charge, and clearly some models to be really applauded for both you and the commission. When you look at Aventura, to your point, as the densest condo, residential community in terms of condominiums in South Florida, we're obviously seeing other cities start to follow suit proportionally as more and more condominiums are being built. What are some of the lessons learned through all of this process, politics aside, in terms of the way that you have to manage a condominium city versus a city that has more diversity in terms of its residential housing? I
don't want the score to be 2-0, but it's a very good question.
Because it's got to be unique. I mean, I got to imagine.
Mayor, if you want to be invited back, you better stop scoring.
You better ask a couple questions so I can say.
I mean, it's a different sport, right? I mean,
but I think, another way to look at it is, what lessons have we learned about condominium management that we have to have our eyes open for? I'm not going to discuss details, but you may be aware that one of our condominium presidents was taken away in handcuffs a few months ago.
Yep.
And that was a 4-year investigation. All credit in the world to the Aventura Police Department. This is a very sophisticated case, a very deep dive, labor-intensive investigation, along with the state attorney's office.
I still think 4 years is too long to have an investigation about someone who's the manager and the engineer and the president and this and that and the other. To me, it's got to happen faster.
But you still got to prove it. I mean, you still have a district attorney who's got to prosecute a case.
So I think one of the lessons is, when you have residents coming forward saying something's wrong in my building, something's wrong with my management, you need a police department that's capable of doing not just traditional police work, but this forensic accounting type police work as well.
Economic crimes.
And Aventura's become very adept at that.
That's fantastic, because most cities will not deal with economic crime. What they say is file a civil suit and deal with it in court.
And so that's one thing that I think
that's a great
yeah, it is
thing.
Anecdotally, that Don Sofer started developing Aventura in the 70s. He chose the name Aventura. By the way, if I had $1 for every time someone said, "How do you allow them to use the name Aventura? They're not an Aventura." And I said, I have a 3-word answer for you: New York pizza. How many restaurants ago? I said, the Spanish word for adventure, you think we own it, and
right.
Where do you think Turnberry came from? You think he invented that? And he took that from Scotland, right? So anyway, it's funny. But in the 70s, Don Sofer hired a senior designer from Morris Lapidus's office, a very, very talented Yale graduate architecture student from the Bronx, to be his architect for all the condos that he was designing along Country Club Drive.
Right.
Then the South African Trump family, Jules and Stephanie Trump, Eddie Trump, Willie Trump, hired the same architect to do all the buildings on Williams Island, William being Willie Trump. And then this Canadian company, Coscan, hired the same architect to design all of the waterways, One Island Place.
So there's a continuity there.
That architect, we counted, there's 200 buildings standing in our 3.5 square miles by the same architect with 3 or 4 different developers.
Where's the statute for this person?
So I'm telling you, the irony of it is, totally unrelated to that, in the late 80s, a young lawyer, that would be me, moves down here and ends up falling in love with a woman and marrying her. And his father-in-law happens to be that architect, Robert Swedrow, that designed all the buildings in Aventura. Somehow, all these years later, that son-in-law becomes the mayor of that city. It's a very ironic story.
That's a small town story.
Now, I haven't been married to her in 15 years. He's not my father anymore.
But that's just a detail.
But right. As soon as I was elected as a commissioner in 2012, I made sure that we gave him the key to the city as Aventura's architect. I mean, I'm still very close, and I speak to my former wife every day, literally. We're very, very good friends. But it's amazing.
I can relate to that.
Imagine that.
He's still working, because when you come from the Bronx, you don't retire. He's still designing for the Sofer family. He's still designing. He's still doing projects. Turnberry Ocean Club on Sunny Isles was him. So it's pretty cool. So anyway, that condominium lifestyle was in my wheelhouse, because during the marriage, and I didn't live in Aventura, I was in Surfside and was
You were dreaming condo.
elected official. I was his in-house attorney, and I was dealing with what happens, as you may know. I know you know for sure. Every time a condominium gets turned over, there's a lawsuit against the developer and the architect.
Amen. Hallelujah. Haber law.
And he used to say, but there's no design defect. And I'm like, they just throw everything out there.
Oh, don't say there's no design defect. There's always one or two. By the way, I don't know why anybody...
He'll chip concrete off the walls himself if he has to. I mean,
Listen, stucco cracks, concrete and rebar rust.
He'll repurpose those buses and just drive it into the wall.
It's called value engineering.
You're winning too much today.
It's that dirty word, value engineering, and it's not the architect.
It's the developer.
Right, it's the developer.
I'm not disagreeing
Anyone
with
that
that.
touched the building gets thrown in. So I remember his professional malpractice insurance was through the roof.
Right.
Till
Errors and
stopped
omissions
having-
insurance was the big bill he had to pay for.
Until they became like anesthesiologists and OBGYNs and
Not
said,
carry
we're
it.
going without insurance.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
Signed your life. So bringing this full circle and talking about, obviously everything again that you've done, that the city has done, what now instead of the past is the future of Aventura? I mean, it's one of those places where you say continuous improvement. Sure. What else can you be doing, and what else do you have in mind for the city?
So full circle, yes, we have a circle. It's 3 miles once around.
In less than 60 minutes, by the way.
In the center is 36 holes of Turnberry Resort Golf, and that's where our community, where you grew up and where I grew up in New England, you had a green.
Right.
That's our green. People walk every morning. People walk.
I think
every
it's an
evening.
incredible
Church
place
at the
to
head of the
work.
square. He's been to where I'm from. Church at the head of the square.
It's really
Gazebo
wonderful.
on the green. Right.
So the future is, first of all, as I mentioned, I'm going to get a new school built. We're becoming a more and more family-oriented community. We just finished construction of our 5 pickleball courts with shade canopy. Our soccer programming, everything keeps expanding. We're just about to open an outdoor basketball court. And we are becoming, and we have become in the last 2 years, a dining destination. New restaurants keep opening. Amalfi Llama, STK, Joey, Salty Donut. It keeps going and going and going. And Toku. Everyone
Because you have a
everyone loves Motec.
self-contained area
I've
where
been
people...
to many of those, and it's absolutely true. And my wife and I are foodies, and we've found ourselves going to Aventura more than we ever have. And by the way, for disclosure, when I first moved from Boston to South Florida, I lived at what is now, I believe, Avanti on 185th Street. That was my first home in South Florida. And so I had a soft spot for Aventura for a long time, but there was only a handful of destination dining places that you would really say, yeah, it's really good. Right now, every time I come back to Aventura, there's another restaurant that's open.
They're always opening a new restaurant.
And packed. And, we went on a Friday night, it was jammed.
And we have to credit, Jackie Sofer at the mall decided to expand the mall with some very, very good restaurants. I mean, if you look at Toku, the Asian fusion that used to be Grand Lux Cafe space, I mean, they clearly put millions of dollars into it. It is just a beautiful space.
It's an incredible space.
And when they close the wall off in the evening and with direct access from the street with the valet, you're not in a mall.
Right.
It's really, really one of the things we're focused on. If you go to Aventura Park Square, where Casa d'Angelo is, it's fantastic. Absolutely packed. So
We're going to go with the mayor because that way we'll get a table.
It has become a destination for us because we have plenty of friends in Broward County.
I'm telling you, the mayor's getting us a table.
It's a perfect intermediate. So that's great.
So the future is all good. Turnberry Resort, the JW Marriott, is going to do a major renovation. They bring in some very sophisticated conferences. Last night I was there for the United Hatsala Gala, where
I was supposed to be there.
Floyd Mayweather was honored, where Jay Leno did a stand-up routine, where Alan Dershowitz gave me his newest book. I mean, this is Aventura. Right. This is Aventura Weekly now. It's fantastic, and I would urge everyone to come and check it out.
I have a final question for you, Mayor.
Sure.
We just talked about what's the future of Aventura. What's the future?
You and I were going to the same place. Can Aventura keep you?
No. What's the future for Mayor Howard Weinberg? Do you believe that you, when you are termed out as mayor, will seek another office elsewhere in order to help the people of your community? Because I will say this, being a public servant is a very difficult job in today's world. They crawl all over you to find dirt because only dirt sells newspapers. You know, good stories don't really sell newspapers as much as, you know, difficult stories or horrific stories. What do you see for yourself as a community leader and someone who has sacrificed to do public service?
First of all, thank you for recognizing that it is a sacrifice.
Total sacrifice, no doubt about it. My uncle, Leonard Haber, was mayor of Miami Beach, was commissioner for many years. My father and I looked at my uncle and said, this man's crazy. There's no way we would ever do something like this. But as a crazy person, what do you see for yourself going forward?
He did sit in a room with you for an hour, so yes.
You know, I'm in my second municipality in elected office. I love local politics. I like almost every morning, if I don't have a meeting, I put on 30 pounds of weights and I walk to Moe's and I sit outside and I drink my decaf. And I did it in Surfside. It was at Flanagan's. I call it headquarters, where people can come and they can tell me the good and they can tell me the bad. And
don't forget the ugly.
I skip the ugly if possible. But
who was the ugly? Was it Lee? What was his name?
You're talking Clint Eastwood movies?
Yeah.
Spaghetti Westerns. I'll come up with it in a second. We're all too old.
So
we are old.
I love the interaction. I'm a people person. And at any other level of government, that's greatly lessened. So other than, you know, local municipal. So I don't know. Right now, I love it. And the good news is I don't have to think about it yet because I'm only 2 years into my first 4-year term. And
you can go 2 terms?
There is zero in my mind. This is how I set my mindset to win. Because you guys said earlier about being competitive. Ask my pickleball guys. I'm insanely competitive. This is how I said it to me. Nobody is going to beat me at re-election time, period. So I've got 6 more years to keep getting things done, and then I can figure out if and when I want to do something else. But I will tell you that it's very flattering that I was approached by both of the major political parties and asked to run for higher office already by both parties. So I have wonderful relationships with both leadership in Tallahassee. And my answer is the same. I made promises to the people of Aventura. I got to keep every promise. I've got to open a school. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. So
you have much work to do.
Which, of course, is only going to make them hungrier to try to win you over. So But
it's so much fun. I have to say, I can't lie. It's hard work and all that. It is so much fun to see things work out and see people happy, especially our youth. When we do some programming, whatever, and it works, and the kids are smiling, and the moms are happy, I love it. You know, I'm a dad of 3. That we all know that's what it's all about. That's the beginning and end.
Absolutely.
Well, Mayor, I want to thank you. I know for Josh and I, thank you for coming on. We hope we'll have you again in the future. Thank you for all you do, not only for Aventura, but for our local South Florida community. And really very much appreciate it. And congratulations on all of your achievements, including most recently the Heroes.
Hero Housing, baby.
Housing,
It's just really amazing.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, Aventura Mayor Howard Weinberg, thank you so much for joining us on Sunset and Sold. I'm Josh Tomey, David Haber. Please join us online. Dave, you want to start this time with X? Go ahead and get it out of the way.
X.
And
Facebook.
X and Facebook. It's about the limit of what he's got. Join us as always on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Music, iTunes, as well as all of your favorite social media channels. Again, thank you for
Happy New Year.
And happy holidays.
And happy holidays.
Happy holidays to everyone. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. And we will see you in 2025. This is Sensane and Sold. We'll see you next time.